Hello everyone, welcome to the Online Autism Summit. I'm your host, Nick Fransen. We have Dr. Campbell McBride with us today, very special treat. She almost needs no introduction in the world of autism. She has been there and knows so much. So Dr. McBride, welcome today.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, it's what I wanted to talk about. First of all, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you got into autism, and of course the GAPS diet.
I'm a mainstream medical doctor, and my first child was diagnosed autistic at the age of 3. He had a very severe form of autism. Very quickly I realized that my own profession had absolutely nothing to offer my child, and that threw me into a very steep learning curve, a very long journey. The result of which is that my son now is grown up. He's a healthy, normal young man leading a normal life. He's at university, has a girlfriend, and has a normal life. And having learned what I could learn with my own child, and then starting to help other families around, I've opened a clinic, and since then I have been working with many thousands of children with this condition, with good results.
Many thousands is exactly right. So your book is wildly popular. It's called The GAPS Diet, and it will give us some great information. We'll get into that in a minute. First of all, why don't we start up with the gut and the brain connection. Why is this such a big issue in the autism world, and why is the gut such a big problem with the brain?
Because I'm absolutely sure, based on my clinical experience, and I'm sure many health practitioners would agree with me, that autism is a digestive disorder. Autism is born in the gut. Children with autism, vast majority of them, more than 90% of these children, are born with a perfectly normal brain. These are perfectly normal children. But what happens with the children, that from day one, their digestive system gets populated by abnormal, unhealthy mixture of microbes, which they acquire from the parents, and that becomes their gut flora. And this abnormal gut flora damages the integrity of the gut wall, making it porous. So the gut, instead of being a source of nourishment for the child, becomes a major source of toxicity in the body. All these pathogens digest the food in their own way, converting them into toxins, hundreds and hundreds of very poisonous chemicals, which are absorbed through the damaged gut wall, get into the brain, and clog the brain with toxicity. If you observe any normal baby, any typically developing child, they're like little sponges. They listen to everything, they stare at everybody, they touch everything, they take everything in their mouth. What are they doing? They're using their sensory organs to collect information from the environment. They use their ears, their vision, their tactile sensitivity, their touch, their taste buds and other sensory organs. And then this information is passed to the brain to be processed, and that's how the child learns that this is mommy and this is daddy, I can trust them. This is a toy, I play with it like this, I don't line it up, I don't destroy it, I don't throw it. This is food, I eat it in a certain way, these are other human beings around, I copy them. But the brain of a child with abnormal gut flora is clogged with toxicity. It is unable to process all that sensory information properly. All this information coming into the brain turns into a mush, into a noise, from which the child cannot learn anything useful. That's why autistic children do not learn that this is mommy and daddy. They are known to pick up a hand of any stranger on the street and walk away, with mommy running behind and screaming his name, because mommy doesn't mean any more than any other human being around. They don't know what to do with toys, they don't know what to do with food, they don't know how to copy other children. Instead, their brain develops screen-saving procedures, which manifest themselves as self-stimulation. Repetitive, senseless movements. This is like a screen-saving procedure for the brain, like a screen-saving procedure your computer has on its screen. So that's what happens to autistic children. So in order to help the child, to pull the child out of this disaster, it is the gut we have to focus on. We have to change the gut flora, make it normal, healthy. We have to seal and heal the gut wall, so the gut stops leaking this river of toxins into the child's system. So the child then starts digesting the food properly, and the gut becomes a major source of nourishment as it's supposed to be, instead of a major source of toxicity. And once that river of toxins stops coming from the gut to the brain cleans up. And in small children it cleans up quite quickly. And once it's cleaned itself, from that moment on, the child wakes up, they come out of this toxic fog, and they're able to learn. That is the moment when we can start teaching the child. It is important to teach autistic children in a certain way, very structured way, because children of any human being, typically developing children, learn certain skills in a certain window of opportunity. We have to learn to walk around the age of 1. We have to learn to speak within the second year. We have to acquire certain skills at a certain window of opportunity. And if the child has been in a toxic fog during that window, they miss it out. And later on, once they missed it, they're not going to necessarily pick up all the skills themselves and learn them themselves. We have to then intensively teach them the skills that they have missed out on. So with autistic children, there is a sense of urgency. The younger the child is, when we can put them on the GAPS nutritional protocol, the less they have missed out on their development, less windows of opportunity have been missed out. So the quicker the child catches up, and the quicker the child recovers, and the more fully the child recovers. The older the child is, the more they've fallen behind their peers of the same age, the more they have to catch up, and the more difficult it is to pull them out of autism completely, and the more incomplete their recovery can be. In my experience, children up to the age of 4.5 to 5 generally can recover 100% from autism. Children who are older will recover to various degrees, depending on individual circumstances, but there may be some leftover symptoms. Still, it will be a very different child which can function. Okay.
Now, tell me, how does the gut of an autistic child, how do the microbes become so altered and become so toxic to the brain?
Absolutely. While the child spends 9 months of pregnancy in mom's womb, as far as we know, the child has no gut flora. The digestive system is sterile, and the body of the child is sterile. That's as far as we know at the moment. When does the child acquire the first mouthfuls of bacteria? At the moment of birth. When the baby goes through the birth canal of the mother, the baby swallows liquids in the birth canal, and whatever bacteria come in, whatever microbes come in, become the child's gut flora. So whatever lives in mom's birth canal, in mom's vagina, is the source of the child's gut flora. Where does the vaginal flora come from? From the bowel of the woman. In my clinic, 100%, pretty much 100% of women who have autistic children have abnormal gut flora themselves, which means they would have abnormal gut flora in their birth canal, and that's what their baby has acquired from day one. I had about a handful of moms in my clinic who didn't seem to be affected in that area. In every single case, the father was absolutely riddled with abnormalities in his gut flora. Of course, the father would have his own flora in the groin and all the organs there, which comes out of his bowel, and he shares that flora with the mother on a regular basis. So that's where it came from in those children. In children who were born through C-section, the flora comes more opportunistically from people who look after the child, from their hands, from the bottle, from utensils, from the breast of the mother. Our body, our whole body, all of our skin has got its own flora. It's richly populated by microbial flora, which also generally comes out of the digestive system of the person. So if a woman has abnormal gut flora, she will have abnormalities in her flora, on her breasts, on her nipples, on her hands, and everywhere else. So that's where these children acquire the gut flora. And unfortunately, a growing proportion of children in the Western world are acquiring abnormal flora from their mothers. Before I even talk about the health of the child in my clinic, I always first talk about the health of the mother, the father, the siblings in the family, other children, and the grandparents on both sides. And from that data, a picture has emerged of an epidemic, another epidemic of abnormalities in the gut flora, starting from the moment antibiotics came on the market. If a grandmother, for example, who was born after the Second World War, had a few courses of antibiotics, and they were not commonly prescribed in those days, which damaged her gut flora slightly, and she would have health problems which are connected to those abnormalities. Then she gave birth to her daughter in the 70s and 80s now, and she passed her slightly damaged abnormal flora to the daughter at birth. Those generations of girls who were born in those years then went through the childhood with antibiotics being prescribed for every cough and sneeze, because they were really very, very widely prescribed. Every course of broad-spectrum antibiotics damages the beneficial microbes in the gut and leaves niches for the pathogens to spread and to overgrow. So from the course of antibiotic to the next course of antibiotic and to the next course of antibiotic, the girl will have less and less of the good left in her gut wall and more of the pathogens. And then these girls, when they come to the age of 14, 15, they are put on a contraceptive pill. Contraceptive pill has a devastating effect on the gut flora, and now young ladies have to take it for quite a few years before they're ready to have their first child. Add to that the damage from various chemicals, personal care products, the vanity industry, and the junk foods that these generations of girls have grown up on. Processed foods, processed carbohydrates almost exclusively feed pathogenic species of microbes in the gut, allowing them to proliferate, to grow. So these generations of girls, by the time they decide to have their first child, have seriously abnormal gut flora. And that's what they are passing to their child at birth. What I see now that every year, the ladies who are having their first child have a little bit more damaged gut flora than the ladies who had children in the previous year. And every year that situation is getting worse and getting deeper. And that reflects in the epidemic of autism that we see. It has been predicted that by 2025 or so, I'm sure you've heard this figure, 1 in 2 children in the English-speaking world are going to be diagnosed with this terrible disorder. When I started practicing 20-odd years ago, we were diagnosing 1 child in 10,000. Then quite quickly we started diagnosing 1 child in 150. Now we're diagnosing 1 child in around 35, 45 in the Western world. And the scientists have already projected that line to the 2020s, and that's the prediction they're giving us. And unfortunately, the epidemic is not going to stop there. It will continue. Half of our children will be autistic, and the epidemic will continue. Who's going to look after those children? Because the other half are not healthy either. They have allergies, they have asthma, they have rheumatoid arthritis, they have diabetes type 1, they have other mental issues, learning disabilities, and problems and neurological disorders. So something very terrible is happening to the humanity in the Western world in particular. And the basis of these epidemics is gaps, gut and psychology and gut and physiology syndrome, both of which abbreviate to the same gaps in the English language, which basically means the person has abnormal gut flora, and this abnormal gut flora does not allow the gut to feed the person properly, so the person develops multiple nutritional deficiencies. At the same time, a river of toxicity flows from the gut into the body, gets into the bloodstream, gets into the lymph, gets distributed all over the body, and wherever these toxins get to, they cause disease. In autistic population, that's the brain. But of course, if you look at every autistic child, I'm sure the parents can reflect on that. The child is physically unwell as well. They have digestive system, they are clumsy, they have loose joints, joints which hyper stretch. They have low muscle tone, they have they have eczema, they have psoriasis, they have chronic cystitis, they have all sorts of physical symptoms as well, because every organ in the body is affected by this river of toxicity. On top of that, of course, the immune system cannot stand by and do nothing about this situation. It launches inflammation and it launches autoimmunity. Every autistic child has a lot of autoimmunity going on in their bodies, which means that their immune system is attacking the child's own organs and tissues, adding more symptoms, adding more problems. Allergies and intolerances are a typical part of the picture as well. And the holes that develop in the gut wall are like an open gate for all sorts of microbes and parasites to get through and get distributed around the body, settle in different tissues and organs, start growing, start building nests, and adding their own symptoms, their own problems to the whole picture.
So some really interesting information that you have here. First of all, the importance of starting early, right? I mean, that's of course very important. But what's the likelihood that we're able to repopulate the gut and restore a normal flora? I've even heard it from some people that it's possible there are certain microbes within our microbiome that are not able to be replicated or reproduced. Can you give some light on some of that information?
Well, the study on the microbiome is very young. They are discovering fascinating facts every day, but it is still the tip of the iceberg that they have researched. Our bodies have been designed by Mother Nature, and Mother Nature took a very long time to design our bodies, some 4 billion years as far as our science thinks. And every little detail, every little biochemical process was worked out very carefully by Mother Nature. The amount of knowledge that is coded and programmed within our bodies is immense. And our science hasn't got even a clue yet how it all works and how it all really came about. The GAPS nutritional protocol, which is in my book, which is described in my book as a self-help program, it is working with Mother Nature and working with your own body, working with your body's programmed intelligence to heal itself. Because it is your own body that heals you, not the doctor, not the supplement, not anything else from the outside. Just give your body the tools, work with it, and it'll sort everything out itself. I have seen this in many thousands of children and adults. It is possible to recover from most debilitating, appalling illnesses, recover fully, and lead a normal, healthy life.
Can you tell me the importance of breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, and how does that affect the microbes within the gut?
Breastfeeding is absolutely essential. It is absolutely essential, but it is a double-edged sword, and I'll explain why. Milk of any human being, of any mammal, is the white blood of the female with red blood cells removed. It's alive. It is a living substance coming from the mother to the baby. A woman with abnormal gut flora will have a river of toxicity flowing from her gut into her bloodstream. Her blood will be full of toxins, full of antibodies that her immune system has developed, full of immune complexes, full of allergy-causing immune complexes, and God knows what else. And all of that flows in the breast of the woman, in her breast milk, and coming to the baby. So babies who are born to the mothers with abnormal gut flora acquire this abnormal gut flora from day one. While they're breastfed, they're receiving all this protection that the mother's body has developed against her own gut flora. That is why babies, while they're breastfed, usually thrive. They may have colic, they may have eczema, they may have different symptoms, but overall they're growing, they're developing, the development is normal in the child, and nobody's too much concerned. But as soon as the breastfeeding stops, that protection stops as well. And that is the moment when the gut flora in the baby, which is abnormal, suddenly explodes in its growth, and that is the moment when the child starts developing symptoms of learning disability, of autism, or hyperactivity, or dyslexia, or dyspraxia, or something else, or diabetes type 1, or rheumatoid arthritis, or anything else, or a plethora of physical symptoms. So the protection that the mother provided. But I have seen many women who could not breastfeed their babies properly because her milk was so toxic, the baby just falls asleep on it after a few mouthfuls. And this is the women who say they feed and feed and feed 24 hours a day, and they're exhausted, the child's exhausted, and the child is not growing. Because part of toxicity that is coming from her gut is in the form of opioids. You're all familiar with the research into casein and gluten, which don't get digested properly in people with abnormal gut flora and absorb in a partially broken down form of these peptide chains, which in their structure is similar to heroin and morphine and other opioids. So of course, as soon as the baby had a mouthful of those opioids, the baby falls asleep quite naturally. And then the baby wakes up hungry because he didn't have enough food, and he wants more. And in many situations, we have to stop the breastfeeding. in these women, and we have to find an alternative to the breastfeeding. I have another group of children which are fairly new, and these are babies with diabetes type 1. When I started practicing as a medical doctor, we were diagnosing 18-year-olds. The youngest were 18-year-old people with diabetes type 1. Usually we didn't see it in children. Then within this last few 20-25 years, it became younger and younger and younger, and now we're diagnosing 9 months old, 6 months old, a year old with diabetes type 1. And almost without exception, these babies are breastfed. So the first thing that we have to do in these children is stop the breastfeeding, because it is the toxicity in the mother's milk that is causing the diabetes, that causing the damage in the baby. And we have to work very hard on healing these children and healing their digestive system. The same happens with many other groups of children, many other disorders. There is one disorder which I'm sure many autistic children have as well. That is FPIES, food protein intolerance enterocolitis syndrome. These are babies who cannot digest any protein at all. They just vomit, diarrhea, don't put weight on, and the doctors test them and find that the child is allergic to all protein on the planet, which means the child's digestive system is so damaged, so porous, so leaky, that all protein the child eats absorbs undigested and triggers reactions in the body. So what we do with this group of children, we put them on the introduction diet, GAPS introduction diet, or even a pre-diet when we remove all plant matter from the child's diet altogether. And we work very slowly and very patiently on healing and sealing the gut wall in the child. And as soon as that happens, the child is able to digest the foods and they start putting weight on children. So these are just two new developments in this population of children, but there are many other illnesses and new diagnostic labels coming in, unfortunately, just to demonstrate that the whole situation is getting worse year after year. Okay.
Now, let's talk a little bit about vaccines. What is the role of vaccines in autism? Is it a bigger role than we think, or is it a lesser role than we think?
We human beings have created an environment on this planet unfit for our children to come into, unfortunately. And vaccines are one of the facets of that environment. I have about 15-20% of children in my clinic where the parents can make a connection between MMR and the development of autism in the child. I have the same number of families in my clinic who make a connection with DPT vaccinations, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. But majority of parents cannot make any connection with vaccinations. And as a recent development, since Andrew Wakefield has published his research, and since the whole controversy about MMR began in Britain first and then it spread all over the world, I have a large percent of autistic children coming into my clinic who have not been vaccinated at all with any kind of vaccine, and yet they are profoundly autistic, these children. So my opinion is that vaccines do not cause autism. They are not the cause of autism. These children are born with children generally are born with an immature immune system. Establishment of gut flora in the first few days of the child's life plays a crucial role in appropriate maturation of the child's immune system. These children acquire abnormal gut flora from day one from their mothers and other people around, from their parents. So they're left immune compromised. Vaccination is a huge attack on the immune system. And in a proportion of these children, if the immune system is already compromised enough, vaccination can provide that last straw that breaks the camel's back and starts the autistic development, or starts diabetes type 1, or starts FPIES, or starts something else in the child. But in majority of children, their immune system is not damaged enough to actually start the problem, but it will bring the child closer to developing the problem. Other environmental factors have to be in place for it. But the key here and the problem here is the abnormal gut flora. These are GAPS children who react to vaccinations in this way. Pro-vaccination lobbies say that millions of children around the world get vaccinated every year and they're fine. And indeed, that's the fact. They are fine. These children are not GAPsters. They've got normal gut flora. They have strong constitution. They survive vaccinations. They're okay, these children. Of course, the continuum is very, very widely spread. There are children at different severities and different vulnerabilities, but still, that is the picture. The children who do develop disorders and who do get damaged by vaccinations are GAPS children. They're already vulnerable. They have abnormal gut flora, which means they are immune compromised. They should not be vaccinated at all, these children, with any kind of vaccine until their immune status is better. In my book on gut and psychology syndrome, I have a chapter on vaccinations where I make a proposal what we need to do. We have to change our vaccination protocol because the proportion of children who are GAPS, who are born GAPS, are growing every year. From where I stand, it's already very high. I think it's about half of our newborns this year are probably GAPsters. And every year, the proportion of these children in the population is growing. So based on that observation, we have to change our current vaccination protocol. And I'm afraid the change will not come from the top, because the top is happy. It has to come from the grassroots. It has to come from the parents, from the population. What I suggest we do, we need to develop an immune assay panel for assessing the immune status of every baby before we decide to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. From birth, before we start sticking needles into our babies, we need to assess the state of their immune system first. And there are many things we can do which are completely non-invasive, starting with questionnaires of the parents, the full health history of the family, to see whether this is a GAPS family and whether the child is likely to have acquired abnormal gut flora. Then stool test of the child, urine test of the child, hair mineral analysis, and other non-invasive tests that can be done and which are fairly inexpensive to assess the state of the child's immune system. And if the immune system is compromised, then we must not vaccinate this child until 6 months later or maybe a year later, the child is retested, reassessed, and we find that the immune status is fine at that stage in the child's, and then we can consider vaccinations. What we're doing at the moment is a Russian roulette, which is not very clever. And indeed, it is damaging a growing proportion of children.
Now, with the GAPS protocol, can you give us a breakdown of the main components of GAPS protocol?
Autism is a digestive disorder. I have no doubt about it. Every psychiatric disorder, from my point of view, is a digestive disorder. And that's where we have to start. That's where the treatment has to start. The digestive system is a long tube. What we fill that tube with has a direct effect on its well-being. That is why the diet, the food that we feed the child, is the most important part of the treatment. So GAPS diet has been developed over many years through my experience in my clinic with the thousands of children. It is still evolving, it is still developing, but it is in its state now very effective, very effective. So we have to remove foods which are difficult to digest, which challenge already damaged the gut wall of the child, and which feed pathogenic flora. So we remove all those foods, and these are starchy, sweet, stodgy foods, difficult to digest foods. We have to give the child foods which are nutrient dense, because these children have multiple severe nutritional deficiencies. So the diet consists only of foods which are easy to digest, the way they are prepared in the diet, which provide all the building blocks for the gut wall to heal and seal itself. Because the gut wall is covered by very specialized cells called enterocytes, and these cells have only a very short life. They only live a few days. And the gut constantly gives birth to new baby cells to replace those aging enterocytes, which are being sloughed off and removed and replaced by newly born baby cells. In order to manufacture those baby cells, gut needs materials, bricks and mortar to make them from. And that's what the GAPS diet will provide. It will provide ample amounts of building materials for the gut wall to manufacture healthy, strong, robust enterocytes. And that gives us a real wonderful opportunity to heal and seal the gut wall by giving birth, by stimulating this wonderful process of giving birth of new cells in the gut wall. And nutritional deficiencies are removed very quickly without any supplements in children because these are nutrient-dense foods. The GAPS diet is divided into three parts actually. We have the introduction diet, we have the full GAPS diet, and we have a happy stage of coming off the GAPS diet. Because the beauty of the GAPS diet is you don't have to follow it for life. Majority of people don't have to follow it for life. Some more severe situations do, but majority of people don't. And once the gut has healed itself, once the child has been healthy for long enough time, all the symptoms are gone, then slowly we can reintroduce foods which were not allowed on the GAPS diet. We can widen the diet quite a lot for children. Not everybody has to start from the introduction diet. That's what parents need to understand. Introduction diet is hard to follow. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance. It takes a well-organized, good cook in the family and a well-set-up kitchen. If your kitchen is not set up, if you don't know how to cook, if for practical reasons you are not ready yet to start that, start from the full GAPS diet. You will get a huge amount of healing, huge amount of improvements, and it is easier to follow, particularly in the initial stages. Give it a few months and use those months for learning how to cook, for setting up your kitchen, for getting all your supplies of good food and proper kitchen equipment, and getting into the network of other parents who are already doing it, who will help you with support, with advice, with cooking with you, maybe fermenting with you, maybe doing other things with you. And then at a certain point you will find that you are ready, practically ready to implement the introduction diet. It is a good idea for every autistic child to go through the introduction diet at some stage in the program, because it will achieve a deeper healing for the child. It has a real ability to heal and seal the gut wall. There is, in fact, I don't know of any other approach in the world which will do that for you. Only GAPS introduction diet can do that for you, as far as I know. To heal and seal your gut wall, to really repair it properly. It will reestablish normal gut flora in the child's digestive system, and from then autism may become a history for your child, because once that river of toxicity stops, the brain cleans up and the child starts developing normally. GAPS nutritional protocol is a program. It's not just a diet. The diet is a major part of it, but there are two other parts. The second part are supplements. And we use only a minimal amount of supplements, which are really foods, because the supplement market is huge. It's a multi-billion market, and every company puts a lot of marketing materials behind their supplements. They are expensive. Trouble is, many supplements contain ingredients in them which can interfere in the healing processes in the gut wall. You don't want to put a lot of effort into the diet and then spoil the whole thing with a pill that you paid a lot of money for. So we keep supplements to an absolute bare minimum, particularly at the beginning of the program. We just have a probiotic, and we have cod liver oil for vitamin A and vitamin D and cholesterol, and we have fish oils, and in the majority of children that's it. That is all we start with. Just fish oils, which are really food, cod liver oil, which is food, and probiotics, which are really food. And later on, once the gut has healed itself to a large degree, the diarrhea is gone, the bloating is gone, the pain in the digestive system is gone, the burping and belching and reflux is gone, then we can look into other supplements if we really want to try them. And at that stage, it's a good idea to work with an experienced practitioner who will advise you on what kind of supplements are worth buying and what kind of supplements are not worth buying, because there are many of those on the market. So the second group are supplements, and the third part of the protocol is lifestyle changes, and those are just as important. We live in a toxic world, and the world is becoming more and more toxic day by day. We're exposed to a huge amount of man-made chemicals which do not exist in nature, which means when they get into your body doesn't have solid mechanisms to deal with them, to remove them, to neutralize them. They actually get stored in the body, these chemicals. Our chemical industry up to date has produced about 80,000 of chemicals which do not exist in nature. And the list is growing all the time. Trouble is, many of these chemicals are fat soluble. Once they get into your body, they target fatty tissues. The brain is a very fatty tissue. It becomes a dumping ground for many man-made chemicals, Toxic metals is one important group here. Mercury, lead, arsenic, aluminium, nickel, and other metals are fat soluble. So they get stored in the brain, in the spine, and in the rest of the nervous system, and in the bone marrow, which is a very high fat organ, interfering in the production of immune cells and blood cells. We have an epidemic of leukemia amongst our children, which is growing all the time. These are children who have a bone marrow full of toxic metals, full of other chemicals as well. And our endocrine glands are very high fat organs. Our pancreas, our thyroid gland, our adrenals, and other glands, they get targeted by these sort of things. Many personal care products, our shampoos, our bubble baths, our deodorants, our lotions and potions that we apply all over ourselves, absorb in seconds, because your skin is not a barrier, it is a sponge. It absorbs pretty much everything you put on it in seconds. When you put a deodorant under your armpit, you can taste it in seconds in your mouth, because it's already in your bloodstream and it's already in your saliva. And that's what's happening with every personal care product. So we have to clean the life of the patient completely. We have to remove as many man-made chemicals out as we possibly can, which means no personal care products at all. We use only edible, natural things for washing ourselves, for brushing our teeth, for washing our hair, and so on. For example, the hair can be washed with a raw egg yolk. Just separate raw egg yolk from the white, rub it on wet hair and rinse, and you'll find it works beautifully as a shampoo. That's how ladies used to wash their hair for millennia, before we invented shampoos. The teeth of the child should be brushed with olive oil. Have a dish of olive oil in your bathroom, just dip the brush in it and brush with olive oil. Nothing else should be in the child's mouth. Only edible things can be put on the skin. If you can't eat it, you can't apply it to your skin. So for moisturizing the skin, we can use olive oil, coconut oil, pork fat, duck fat, goose fat, butter, ghee, any animal fat, any oil, any natural oil. Human skin should not be washed with any soap. That is an absolute anathema to the human skin, because your skin works very hard to produce oily secretions to provide a habitat for your skin flora. Because your skin flora needs a habitat, it needs to live somewhere. Every time you use a shampoo or you use a bubble bath or a shower gel or another soap on your skin, you're washing off that habitat. You're damaging your skin flora, and you're exposing your skin then to invasion by pathogens and to drying out. I've seen so many problems, so many skin problems, dermatitis, eczema and so on, disappear on people's skin when they stopped using soaps. Human body should be washed only with water, nothing else. If you need a deodorant, freshly pressed lemon juice will work beautifully for you. Just apply a little bit of half lemons in your bathroom, a bowl of lemons and a knife, that's all. And use that under your armpits, because we mustn't stop sweating. Sweating is a very important cleansing function in the body. What the lemon juice will do, it will just stop the smell. Stop the sweat developing a smell. So there are many, many things we can do to clean that out. Another big factor that is came recently into our lives, and that is electromagnetic pollution. We live in an electromagnetic soup, which is getting thicker and thicker. We can't see it, but we know that it's there, because our mobile phones are working, our Wi-Fis are working, our smart technologies are working, and it's getting thicker and thicker. I have children in my clinic who cannot fall asleep and will continue crying and screaming until the whole house is disconnected from the mains. One switch is turned off. All electronic devices have to be switched off in the house. Only then the child can calm down and sleep. I have patients in my clinic who have such severe neurological symptoms and cramps that they have to get up in the middle of the night, go out in the garden and walk barefoot on wet grass, no matter what the weather is. And only earthing themselves this way, the cramps disappear, the neurological symptoms stop, and they have to go back, and they can go back to bed and can sleep a little longer, these people. There are many people who are very sensitive and they indeed have symptoms. Majority of people don't have symptoms, so they think that, we can't possibly suffer from these things. You may not realize that your migraine headaches, or your psoriasis, or your chronic cystitis, or your nephropathy, or your panic attacks, or your memory loss, or any other symptom is not linked to what is going on in electromagnetic pollution. You may not make the connection, but it is connected. And the research is coming out now. We already have some studies coming out to show that mobile phones are causing brain cancers. And I'm sure we'll have an explosion of brain cancers in the generation of children who started using mobile phones for quite a young age, quite a lot. So that's another factor. Pharmaceutical drugs and redecorating materials and anything else you can think of that is toxic and that is man-made has to be removed out of the child's life for long enough for the child's detoxification system to recover. We all have a marvelous, absolutely amazing system Mother Nature has endowed us with called the detox system. It has its headquarters in the liver and departments in every cell of the body. It is the cleaner in our body. It's the system that constantly deals with byproducts of our own metabolism and with anything toxic coming from the outside. In a child with abnormal gut flora, there's a river of toxins flowing from the gut and hitting the liver first, because all the blood collected from the digestive system comes into the liver first. So this system quite quickly gets broken down in these children. It collapses. Their detox system is broken down. And from that moment on, the child just accumulates and accumulates all these toxic things. And not only that, the byproducts of our own metabolism are not properly processed as a result, because once your neurotransmitters, for example, have accomplished their roles, your serotonin and your dopamine and norepinephrine and endorphins and your hormones, your thyroid hormone, your adrenal hormones and other hormones, and many enzymes and many other active molecules, once they're finished with their jobs, they're usually delivered to the liver to be recycled. But if your detox system is broken down and the liver is unable to handle toxicity, many of these substances don't get recycled. So your body gets filled up with partially broken down and partially spent serotonin and dopamine and adrenaline and thyroid hormone and all sorts of other things. And they're still trying to work. They're still trying to attach themselves to your organs, to your cells, to the receptor sites and do something. And that can cause a plethora of symptoms of their own. Mental symptoms, neurological symptoms, hormonal symptoms, and all sorts of other symptoms. So that's what happens in a person with a broken down detox system, and that's what happens in autistic children. All of them have it damaged and broken down. I have family after family of people who come to me with a thick watch of tests that they've conducted with their child already, and invariably part of that testing is for toxic metals. So the parents tell me, look, he's got mercury, look, he's got lead, he's got all these horrible metals, we must chelate, we must remove them. What I tell the parents, let's wait for about a year, 8 months to a year, and let's work on restoring your child's own detox system. And once that system starts working, once it kicks in, it starts removing everything, all these toxic metals and hundreds of other toxins, which we don't even test for yet, out of the child's body in ways that our science hasn't even discovered yet, hasn't even dreamt of yet, because your body is immensely clever. It has an immense intelligence programmed into it. And indeed, when we retest these children, in more than 85% of these children, the metals are gone. In about a year, 8 months to a year, they're gone. And we didn't do anything about it. We didn't chelate because the child's own detox system has kicked in. And that's what the GAPS nutritional protocol does. Because it stops that river of toxicity coming out of the gut, the liver gets a chance to recover and the child's own detox system starts working. And from the moment it starts working, it will start cleaning up the body. It will start cleaning the brain, cleaning the thyroid gland, cleaning all the other organs in the body, removing toxins. What we also have to understand about toxic metals is that the major venue for removing them out of the body is your bowel, your digestive system. So that molecule of mercury that is in your brain, in order to leave the body, it has to be washed out of the brain. Shuttles have to be attached to it. All sorts of enzymes and vitamins and minerals and other things. And then it's delivered to the wall of the bowel, transported across the wall of the bowel, inside of the bowel, and then the bowel will eliminate it in the stool. Usually when a large amount of these things arrive to the bowel, the person gets a bout of diarrhea, which is good because the bowel perceives this mercury as something very, very damaging. It will pull in salts, pull in water and flush the whole lot out quickly. That is why the premise of any chelating protocol is to heal the gut first. But from my perspective, and from any perspective of any practitioner who has worked on people's gut flora, we know just how difficult it is to heal the gut first and how long it takes for the person. So I would not attempt any chelating protocol until you've healed the gut first. Because if you do it prior to that, you can damage the gut in such a way, you can begin something so severe in the digestive system that will be far more difficult to treat and possibly impossible to treat later on. You can trigger ulcerative colitis, you can trigger Crohn's disease in your child, which your child doesn't have at the moment, or something even more severe, which will be far more difficult to treat later on. Trust the nature, trust the child's body, give the body all the resources in the form of good food, clean environment, cleansing, which is an important part of GAPS nutritional protocol. The detox system will recover itself and it will remove those toxic metals naturally, and we don't even need how it does it. And on top of that, keep in mind that it's not just mercury that is sitting in your child's body. There are hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands of other very dangerous chemicals, no less dangerous than mercury. We just haven't researched them yet. We haven't yet found ways of testing for them and assessing them. Because the gut is a major source of toxicity in these children, and there's a river of various toxins coming in. So that's the GAPS nutritional protocol.
Now, you mentioned earlier with fatty tissue and toxins that are fat-soluble and water-soluble. Can you explain the difference? Is one worse than another?
Well, the way things absorb from the digestive system, they go into two different streams. The fat-soluble things, whether it is nutrients or toxins, largely absorb into the lymph. They bypass the blood. Because they don't dissolve, the blood is a water-based substance. Fats don't dissolve in the blood. They can't travel in the blood without proper packaging. So they absorb into the lymph. And the lymph is collected into the thoracic duct, which goes along your spine and comes up into your neck on the left and opens up into the upper vein, which then opens into the right heart, and the right heart pumps it directly into the lungs. So the first organ that gets hit by fat-soluble toxins are lungs. And children whose lungs are dealing with more than they're supposed to deal with usually have asthma or have some other manifestations of a lung disorder, because the lungs are burdened with too much toxicity and toxins that the lungs are not designed to handle. Water-soluble nutrients and toxins absorb into the blood, and they are collected into a portal system of veins, and that hits the liver first. And the liver is an amazing organ. It's an absolutely miraculous creation. We haven't researched it fully yet by any means, and it neutralizes all of these toxins, and it converts them into something safe, or even uses them, converts them into something useful. What people need to understand also, that liver doesn't store toxins. It isn't a storage place for the toxins. It transforms toxins. It neutralizes them and then passes them on to other organs in the body. Because many people, an important part of GAPS diet is eating liver. Lamb's liver and beef liver, because liver is a powerhouse of nutrition. It will remove a lot of nutritional deficiencies in the child very quickly and very effectively. So liver has to be an important part of the diet. And many people ask the question, well, isn't liver toxic? No, liver doesn't store toxins. Liver processes them and then sends them to other organs. So water-soluble things hit the liver first. The liver neutralizes them, and then that blood becomes clean. It leaves the liver, and it goes into the general circulation. And usually the second organ after the liver that gets the blood are the lungs. So that's the second port of call for water-soluble toxins and water-soluble nutrients are the lungs. And for fat-solubles, they bypass the liver, I'm afraid, fat-solubles. And they hit the lungs first, and then they get distributed around the body and accumulate in high fat organs, such as the brain.
Tell us about prebiotics, fermented foods. How important are these? There is a lot of talk in the probiotic world that probiotics aren't that helpful because there's not such a vast variety of probiotic species available to take. Can you explain that and then how fermented foods might be able to help?
Fermented foods are an important part of the GAPS nutritional protocol. They're really not optional. Apart from people who react to them in the initial stages, but even those people slowly and patiently work on introducing various fermented foods. What people don't understand that fermented foods used to be a normal part of human diet for millennia, for the whole of our existence on this planet probably. Why? Because for millennia we didn't have refrigeration. And we didn't have supermarkets where everything is available the whole year round. Foods were seasonal. So when your cabbages have ripened in September, if you didn't do something with them, they'll just rot away, and for the rest of the year you'll be left without cabbage. Or if you killed an animal and you couldn't eat the whole animal within a few days, it'll rot and you'll be left without meat for God knows how long until you catch another animal. So what did people do to preserve food? They fermented food. Cultures around the world ferment everything. You can ferment anything at all. You can ferment fruit, vegetables, grains, beans, dairy products, meats, fish, anything at all can be fermented to produce different products. And what the fermentation process does, apart from preserving the food for a very long time, fermented cabbage, for example, sauerkraut, can keep for 6 years without changing its taste or without spoiling. And apart from that, it provides potent alive probiotic bacteria with every mouthful. So because people's diet was largely fermented throughout the year, because at any time of the year you ate some foods which were not seasonal right now, you ate them in a fermented form. So you were eating probiotic bacteria all the time. We were supplementing our gut with probiotics all the time, every day at every meal, throughout our existence. And on top of that, the fermentation process pre-digests the food. When we ferment cabbage, when we ferment any other product, the fermenting bacteria, while they're working on it, they break down hard to digest structures in the food. They break down fiber, they break down starch, they break down proteins. They pre-digest the whole thing for us. So our digestive system then doesn't have to do such a hard work to try and digest this stuff. And when it's pre-digesting it like that, it's releasing nutrients. So they become very bioavailable. A good example is, again, fermented cabbage, sauerkraut. A helping of sauerkraut will provide 20 times more bioavailable vitamin C for your body than the same helping of fresh cabbage. Because in a fresh cabbage, vitamin C is locked in a cellular structure and our human digestive system is unable to extract it. It just goes through you without doing you much good. Where in a fermented cabbage, the bacteria have already digested all that, released the vitamin C into the whole mixture, so when we eat it, it absorbs. James Cook, the famous British explorer who discovered Australia, New Zealand, and half the world, it seems, he had barrels of sauerkraut on his ships. That is why his sailors never had scurvy. They didn't know about vitamin C in those days. They didn't know about limes and lemons and oranges. They just knew that sauerkraut prevents bleeding gums. That is why that was one of the major things they took with them on every ship, and every sailor was obliged to eat a helping every single day of sauerkraut. So when we start fermenting foods, and we can ferment vegetables at home, and we can ferment milk, or we can ferment fish, we can ferment meat, we can ferment all sorts of things at home. And there are fermentation recipes in my book, and there are many other books with GAPS recipes that have been written now by parents of recovered GAPS children and by other GAPS people who have recovered with this protocol. They're writing recipe books with wonderful, wonderful fermentation recipes and other recipes. So that is the major part, how we supplement the probiotics in the GAPS nutritional protocol. Commercial probiotics we use in people who are unable to eat fermented foods for whatever reason, who perhaps haven't started fermenting yet because it takes time, who are not set up or not ready. That's usually adults, not children. And people who react. There are people who have a histamine sensitivity because most microbes on our planet produce histamine and produce many other amines, many other substances. For example, many species of lactobacilli that are normal inhabitants of the digestive system produce histamine. Many species of bifidobacteria produce histamine. So many fermented foods contain a lot of histamine as a byproduct of fermentation. And people who are already producing too much histamine in their gut, because they have an overgrowth of pathogenic microbes sitting in their gut which are producing all that histamine, when they eat fermented foods, they react. Quite often they may have symptoms which are not very pleasant. So majority of people, this reaction can be controlled. We start with a tiny amount of fermented food. We stay on that tiny amount until the reaction is gone, the body gets used to it. Then we increase it and we slowly, gradually increase it. And that is a part of die-off reaction that we get with fermented foods. But there are people who have such a violent, such a serious reaction to histamine, they can't have any fermented foods in the initial stages until we worked on other approaches. With these people, we have to start with a commercial probiotic from the beginning. The probiotic market is very large. There are many, many different brands on the market. Majority of them are prophylactic. They're designed for healthy people to keep themselves healthy, to support their gut flora. But they do not make a real difference in the digestive system. You have to look for a therapeutic strength probiotic. There are a few quite good brands on the market, and every practitioner who works with these patients will have these brands, will know what to prescribe. A therapeutic strength probiotic has aggressive species of probiotic bacteria. When you put them into your digestive system, they start killing pathogens. And when those critters die, they release toxins. And these toxins, these are the toxins which make your child autistic. So you can't suddenly give your child a lot of probiotic. This is called a die-off reaction because the pathogens are dying. So you have to start again with these probiotics from a tiny amount and build up gradually to a therapeutic level. Once the therapeutic level is reached, then we stay on it for 6 months minimum, because that's how long it takes on top of the diet, together with the diet, to change the gut flora and to start healing and sealing the gut wall. So probiotics are important. And there are many people who have used both, who have used the fermented foods and the probiotics simultaneously. From my clinical perspective, they do work. They do work.
Now, dairy, let's talk about dairy for just 1 minute. Is some dairy allowed on the GAPS diet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that the community of autistic children, the parents are afraid of dairy because of the widely spread casein and gluten-free diet, GFCF diet. What we do when we ferment dairy, only fermented dairy products are allowed in GAPS nutritional protocol. We cannot have milk as it is because of lactose and because of proteins which are hard to digest. When we ferment milk at home for 24 hours minimum, the protein, the casein, albumin and other proteins in milk get pre-digested. They get broken down properly. The lactose gets consumed because that's what bacteria like to eat. They like eating sugars. So that is a truly lactose-free product. And it's teeming with beneficial bacteria, beneficial microbes. That is why the fermented dairy we use right from the beginning in the GAPS nutritional protocol with autistic children as well as many, many other children. Of course, there are some situations, every child is a unique individual. There are different situations where we have to start perhaps later with the dairy. There is a dairy introduction structure described in my book in detail for people who are starting with a full GAPS diet. People who start with the GAPS introduction can introduce dairy right from the beginning. Also, there are nuances there for children who are primarily constipated or children who are primarily have diarrhea or loose stools. We start with different kinds of dairy with these children. But dairy should not be excluded without good reason because it's a very good source of nutrition. It provides beautiful fatty acids, beautiful fatty acid profile, particularly sour cream, and it gives quite a nice variety to the diet. So there's no need to deprive your child of these nourishing foods unless there is a real reason for it. One major aspect of it is to start with a real milk. What is a real milk? Not the milk you buy in the supermarket. GAPS people do not buy their milk in shops or supermarkets because that milk comes from commercial world, which is not a real milk. It is a Frankenstein white stuff It has nothing to do with what Mother Nature intended the milk to be. We want real cows, the breeds of cows which Mother Nature designed. Jerseys, Guernseys, other natural traditional varieties of cow. I have people in different parts of the world who milk camels, milk donkeys, milk goats, milk ewes, sheep, and even deer, even reindeer. So you can use the milk from any kind of animal, including the cow. But it needs to be a traditional, natural species of the animal, not a commercial breed of cow, those huge Frankenstein cows, black and white cows, Holstein Friesians, which their milk is not real milk. We're starting with the wrong product from the beginning. Secondly, that kind of animal should be organic. It should be exclusively grass-fed, maybe with a little bit of grain, but it should be an organic pasture in the sunlight most of the year. Because their milk then is the right kind of milk, because these animals are meant to be on grass, fed on grass, not on commercial feed and not on grain. So that is a very important prerequisite. Organic, very important. And it needs to be raw. Must not be pasteurized, homogenized, or processed in any other way. Because remember, milk of any animal is alive. It is a white blood of the animal. If you pasteurize it, you kill it. All the white blood cells, immune cells get killed. The enzymes which digest lactose and digest proteins and digest the milk for you basically get destroyed. So milk becomes difficult to digest. On top of that, the proteins get denatured and lipids get denatured by pasteurization. It is a completely different product from what Mother Nature intended. So you want real breed of animal, you want grass-fed, you want organic, you want raw. Nothing done to it whatsoever. And fresh, of course. And then from that kind of milk, we then make our fermented milk products in the GAPS nutritional protocol. Okay? We can't drink plain... No, because these children are lactose intolerant. Almost all of them. They can't digest lactose. So fermentation will remove lactose completely. Secondly, their digestive systems are in no fit state to digest proteins in the milk. Fermentation will break those proteins up for you, will pre-digest them. So the fermented milk is easy to digest and absorb for the human digestive system. Raw milk, milk as it is more difficult. Quite a bit of healing has to happen in the digestive system of an autistic child before they're able to digest straight milk without fermenting it. I have hundreds of autistic children who recovered autistic children in my clinic who are drinking gallons of milk every day now. And they're digesting it beautifully and they're fine and it's doing them only good. But this is the real milk. This is the raw, organic, real milk that they're drinking. But all of these children went first through 2, 3, 4, 5 years of having fermented milk products first, going through the whole GAPS nutritional protocol, recovering, healing their digestive system, and only at that stage we can slowly introduce milk without fermenting it. Okay?
Dr. Campbell McBride, I can't believe that we've already been together for an hour already. Can you tell us, do you see patients? What if somebody wants to get a hold of you? And then, of course, tell us where we can buy your book.
The book is available on Amazon, in many bookshops. If you just Google it, you will find a supplier somewhere locally for you. Amazon is the most readily available one. I had to close my clinic recently because the waiting list was just unfair to everybody, to the patients and to me. And I have a good news, because for the last few years I have been training health practitioners around the world in the GAPS nutritional protocol. They're called certified GAPS practitioners. I have trained more than 1,000 practitioners to date around the world, and they are listed on my website called gaps.me, gaps.me, me like myself. And they're listed by country, by state, by county, and by town. So you can find a practitioner close to you. And many practitioners, apart from working in person with people, they work by Skype and they work by phone. So it doesn't have to be local to you, practitioner. It is worth contacting any of them because we choose them very carefully, we select them very carefully. These are good people. Many of them are GAPsters themselves. Many of them happen to be mothers of recovered children. So they have implemented the GAPS nutritional protocol with their own family. And now they have a wealth of information, a wealth of experience to help other people to go through the protocol. So if you need help, if you need support, go on my website, find the local practitioner, contact them and work with them.
Dr. Natasha McBride, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the Online Autism Summit. It's been wonderful to have you.
Thank you.